This boy goes to his friend's house to call him. As he climbs the stairs, they suddenly break. Somehow, he manages to climb up and sees Mark's wife standing there. She is bleeding heavily, and suddenly her baby falls from her womb, covered in blood. Seeing this, he gets scared and runs away. To find out what happens next, let's dive into the detailed explanation of the movie. Friends, how are you all? Welcome once again to Movies Recap. Friends, you've all surely watched horror movies, but most of them tend to have very similar stories. However, the movie I am about to explain today has a story that's completely unique. What's more, it's Thailand's highest-grossing movie. At the start of the movie, we see a beautiful young woman named Nak, who is about to give birth to a child. However, during childbirth, she starts bleeding profusely and collapses unconscious. The scene then cuts to a battlefield, where we see a young man named Mark, who has been shot multiple times and is critically injured, on the verge of death. His friends carry him out of the battlefield and escape. Meanwhile, Nak successfully gives birth to her baby and waits for her husband Mark to return from the war. A few days later, Mark returns home with his friends. He is overjoyed to see his wife and baby. He tells his friends that they can stay at his uncle's house across the street for as long as they like. The next day, Mark goes shopping with his friends. While shopping, Mark mentions that he's buying everything for his wife, Nak. Hearing this, his friends get scared, drop everything, and run away. One of the women among them tells Mark that his wife is a ghost. But before she can say more, Mark's son arrives, covers her mouth, and takes her inside. Later that night, back at the house, the friends throw a party. One of them, Shane, appears extremely frightened as he suspects that Nak might actually be a ghost. Phuc, another friend, teases him and says there's no such thing as ghosts and dares him to go and call Mark. Shane reluctantly agrees and sets out on a boat to Mark's house. As Shane climbs the stairs to Mark's house, one of the stairs breaks. When he looks ahead, he sees Nak, who is bleeding heavily. Suddenly, a baby falls from her womb, and Shane, terrified, wakes up to realize he had been dreaming. Phuc then forces Shane to actually go and call Mark. Terrified after his dream, Shane hesitantly goes to Mark's house. While climbing the stairs, just like in his dream, the stairs break again. He somehow makes it to the top, only to be shocked to see that Mark's house has turned into a ruin. Then he notices a swing moving by itself and runs back to his friends, telling them everything. However, they dismiss his claims, mock him, and continue partying. The next day, all the friends decide to visit Mark's house. When Tak sees the terrible condition of the house, he begins to believe Shane's story. Then he sees Nak, gets scared, and runs away. Later, while Tak is relieving himself, he finds a corpse holding a ring, the same ring that Nak wears. Realizing that Nak is a ghost, he runs to warn his friends. But Nak uses magic to summon flies to attack him. Tak manages to write everything down for his friends before he dies. Now convinced, the friends decide to escape from the place. However, they spot Mark and resolve not to leave their friend behind with a ghostly wife. Meanwhile, the boy from the market, whose mother had warned them about Nak, arrives. He tells them that Nak killed his mother. Hearing this, they all decide to inform Mark and head to his house. However, Nak appears before they can tell him and invites them inside for a meal. The food she serves turns out to be strange insects and worms. Although they don't want to eat it, they do so out of fear of Nak. Next, they play a guessing game, during which they accidentally call Nak a ghost. This angers her, and they flee from the house. While they're running away, Nak yells at them, telling them to mind their own business and stay out of her and Mark's affairs. They return to their place and lock the door. Shortly after, there's a knock at the door. They assume it's Nak coming for revenge. But when they open the door, it's Mark, furious with them for thinking his wife is a ghost, just like the rest of the villagers. Mark tells them to leave. Shane then says that Mark's wife is dead. Mark dismisses this, calling it a rumor spread by that lady's son, who had tried to assault his wife after Mark left for the war. Mark returns to Nak, and we see that his clothes are heavily soiled. He emotionally tells Nak that it doesn't matter to him whether she's a ghost. He still loves her deeply. They spend some quality time together and visit a fair. Nak wears a mask to avoid being recognized. At the fair, Nak asks Mark if he could live without her if she died. Mark replies that he would rather die with her. They then enter a haunted house attraction, unaware that Mark's friends are secretly following them. Inside, the friends abduct Mark and attempt to flee, but the front door is locked. As they try to escape through another door, Nak suddenly appears in front of them. Shane uses holy water and rice in an attempt to banish her, but Nak extends her long arms to stop him. Frightened, they break through a wall and escape into the jungle. Once in the jungle, the friends try to convince Mark that Nak is a ghost. They urge him to look at her through his legs, as folklore suggests. Mark insists that Nak is not a ghost because he has already looked at her that way. Tin then points out to Shane that Mark's chest is bleeding. He says if Nak isn't a ghost, then Mark must be one, since it would have been impossible for him to survive after being shot so many times in the war. Shane then wonders whose body it was that they found earlier, and recalls the ring on the corpse's hand. They look again but find no ring there. At that moment, Mark shows them the ring hanging around his neck. Seeing this, the friends become terrified. Shane throws the holy rice on Mark, and they all flee in panic. While running away, Kik suddenly stops and says, "If Nak isn't a ghost and Mark is already dead, then Nak is mine. I'll marry her." Filled with dreams of Nak in his heart, Kik arrives outside her house and apologizes, admitting it was his mistake to think of her as a ghost. The group convinces Nak to come with them, promising to explain everything on the way. Nak, along with her baby, boards the boat with them. However, the boat begins sinking due to the excess weight. To reduce the load, they throw all the items overboard, but the weight still remains too much. In desperation, they throw the paddles into the water as well, which prevents the boat from sinking but leaves them stranded with no way to move forward. At this point, Mark appears, but the group shouts at him to stay away, claiming he is dead. Nak, confused, asks when this supposedly happened. Suddenly, Mark begins to drown. The group wonders how a ghost can drown, and Shane spots the ring from the corpse on A's hand. He immediately accuses A of being the ghost and kicks him into the water. They then try to push the boat manually, but Nak hands them the paddles, leaving Shane both relieved and suspicious. He remembers that the paddles had been far away in the water. Nervously, he peers at Nak through his legs and realizes that Nak is indeed the ghost. Terrified, the group jumps into the water and swims away. However, Mark refuses to leave Nak behind. To take him with them, the group hits Nak on the head with a rock, knocking her unconscious. In the next scene, they are at a holy site with a monk. They create a protective circle to keep the ghost away. Nak arrives and they try to defeat her by throwing holy water, but it accidentally spills on Puck instead. The monk asks for holy rice, but Shane had fed all the rice to the pigeons earlier. The monk begins chanting mantras, but Mark angrily kicks him out of the circle. Nak is about to attack the monk, but he escapes through the window. Nak uses her powers to tie up the group with ropes. Suddenly, A appears and explains he isn't a ghost. He admits he stole the ring from the corpse because he was desperate for money. The group tries to escape, but Nak seals all the doors and windows, terrifying them. She demands to know why they want to separate her from Mark. Shane responds, "Because you're a ghost and you can't stay in our world. You even killed that old lady." Nak defends herself, saying, "I didn't kill her. She drowned because she was intoxicated." She pleads with them, expressing her true love for Mark. She says, "If I can't stay with him in this world, I will take him with me to the other world." Hearing this, the group panics and runs away, but Mark stays behind, crying. Nak extends her long arms to wipe his tears and apologizes for hiding the truth from him. She reveals that she had died during childbirth but couldn't bear to leave him. Mark confesses that he already knew she was a ghost because he had seen her lifeless body on the day he returned home, covered in soil. Nak, emotional, says she wants to spend a few more days with him before leaving for good. Mark reassures her, saying she doesn't need to leave because he wants to stay with her forever. This declaration shocks everyone. In the final scene, they open a haunted house at the village fair, using Nak as a real ghost attraction. With this, they start earning a livelihood while living with Nak.